you got to the central word, because that's the same thing that's going to be there. It's not even who's at fault. Both are lacking something, because what she's saying, that too much they write about this, that there's so much else out there of adventures and saying I want to go abroad, or I went abroad, or did these other things, and she doesn't make clear that it's not that she approves that the guys don't do that. And we're going to see in the next one. Okay, so but the idea is that the women do this too much, let's say, and on the other hand, the guys don't do it at all. Yes, Steve.
Just to point to that, I mean, I think there's also like a tendency among like young women who don't want to appear too feminine in order to label themselves as feminists or whatever. So they just like completely go overboard and like, you know, not like make themselves way too manly and never like really write about like these romantic or emotional aspects.
Well, we have to find those women. She was writing about her standard students.
Yeah.
You could do a research on that and find. I mean, you could go out, and the next article does exactly that. Now here, somebody could do this. In fact, if you want a new project, okay. These were college students. The next article by Meinhof, and it's in parentheses because you don't have to read it, but it's interesting, and if you want to work on this, it's an interesting project. What these people did is they went out and they asked, in this case, adult males and females. Some of them were professors, okay, so it's a different age group. But essentially, here they elicited the answer to this question. They said, in a paragraph, okay, it's a short, very short text, tell us the most important event in your life and describe it on half a page, okay? Now you could do this with your friends, you could do this with your parents, and see what happens. And what we have is that the females, and these were all similar educated people and so forth. It wasn't the housewife and the president of the United States. What happens is the males did exactly what you said, that they tended to say, when I decided to leave Nebraska and move to California to college, and my life changed. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with that, and that was a big change. But you can see if you're looking at this, studying the discourse, that there are things, there are gaps. Those gaps, the way they tell their story, even in half a page, you can see gaps that are not said. They're not out, to use that term, about various things. So there are other things there, but that's not coming out. On the other hand, it was only the women. There's only one case that a man mentioned children at all. And not only did the women mention children, but remember, this was supposed to be the most important event of your life, not just tell us a story of what you did on your summer vacation. And even if we had that, that's another American thing. Presumably, boys and girls would come back with different type of stories, okay? But nobody did that analysis. So we started with the college students, and here is now the professor. Here is a female professor, 39 years old. Now, for female professor 39, it's very problematic because women's clocks are moving just when they're at the point, even if they made normal progress in their academic life, that if they have a baby, they'll probably lose their whole career. Because academic life, you have to get a tenured position. And if you drop out of that and you didn't publish enough to get tenure, it doesn't matter you have your doctorate, whatever, you're probably going to drop out of your life. So having a child is a very big decision. Okay, so this woman, female academic, 39 years old. I had been intensely ambivalent, so here starts with the kind of women you're talking about, okay? I had been intensely ambivalent about the prospect of becoming a mother. Indeed, very inclined not even to do so. I feared the loss of identity and my hard-earned professional status. Was dismal about the prospect of an endless round of domesticity and confinement. I loathed the doctors and nurses at the prenatal clinic where they called me Mum. Now, this is in Britain. And they implied that I was now grown up because I was finally over age, in her 30s somewhere, having a baby. I had thought so hard about the disadvantages, so that's her previous self, personality you described. I thought so hard about the disadvantage as I couldn't conceive of the pleasures. Myself was at stake. the conflict were more than anything I suffered during a tortured anorexic adolescence. So even that comes in there. So when A was born, I was unprepared for the joy, not of childbirth, which hurt, but of her. She was like a plum fruit. She smelled good, was intelligent. She looked at me on and on and on. I'll skip all the rest. And then it got better and better, and my second child was just as good. Both daughters were always and continue to be the greatest joys and greatest vulnerabilities in my life. There is no man who writes anything like that. And I picked this woman because she started with a different script, and she's saying, I became mom, essentially. I became a relational person rather than, you know, there's this test. You want to do the test? Okay. Take a pen, and without reflecting on it, please, don't reflect, it's what comes first. Who are you? 1, 2, 3. 3 things.
Like this.
Like a word, not a whole sentence.
I almost wrote my name, so yeah, I was gonna do that.
Okay. No, not your name. Not your name. 3 things quickly. And then I won't ask you what you said unless you want to volunteer. I'll tell you what I did and why. It's not stupid.
I was just
Okay? Are you finished? Does anybody want to volunteer as to what they said? Yes.
I said I'm a woman, a student, and an aunt.
Very interesting. Okay. For many of you, you probably put student, and that's the only one that, of course, that's understandable, but that's not a forever category, but for now it's so important. So that's a very nice one and very standard. That is, most people who are heterosexual women put woman first, and then you put essentially your profession second. And then the third is your relational category, okay? A totally opposite of that would be someone who said, I'm a mom, I'm a wife, and I'm a daughter. And there are actually people who do this, right?
All the 3 words.
And what you have there, you have no identity, essentially. You have only a relational identity. Somebody else, so that's like a perfect standard one, but a balanced one, because you have what you are, and most people put that first. There are some good reasons why they don't sometimes, and you have a professional one there, so it's not all relational. And then you have the human side. Okay, anybody else?
Is it bad if you don't put any relational ones?
It's not bad. I didn't put any relational ones.
Okay, cool.
It means, so I'm going to say it's not bad. It says you are more out of that hegemonic box than she is. Okay?
I vote Peruvian, gay, and linguist.
Yes, okay, in a very different order, yes.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, now, that's interesting too. Okay, now, he does that. Now mine is, my second one is Hungarian, and his is Peruvian is first. Now those are like student in a way, that for different reason. If he stayed in Peru, if he took this test in Peru, it would be ludicrous for him to say I'm Peruvian, right? So then he would have a different 3, because that wouldn't be prioritized as his identity, that is his othering. And to me it's interesting that then he says, it's still interesting to me that he puts that first. And then it's interesting to me that he says linguist last and not second, which is where it would be that gay is more important than linguist. Very interesting. Okay.
I said adopted, writer, and student, and in that order, but ironically my priorities are flipped.
Adopted, writer, and student. Is that
And like, yeah, and when I think about like my
Yeah.
day-to-day life, I'm
yes,
student,
yeah, but that's
writer,
what you
adopted.
said. Yes, but that's what you said.
Yeah.
So that's somewhat like his Peruvian,
Yeah.
because it means the things that people take for granted are different in your case. In his case, because he moved. In your case, for the adopted, what you don't have is gender identity. So that's interesting. And what is it that you didn't have, if you want to tell us, that you brought? You don't have to tell us, just if you want to.
I put some, and then I also put activist as the first one.
The activist was the first one?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That your belief, because that's your belief system. I mean, it's a thing you do, like student, but it's really not like being a linguist and a student. It's really,
Activist
Well, I-
for us.
Sorry?
I will use activists that have like.
Yeah, well, you don't have 4 options. That's the point. You don't have 4 options. So that's interesting. So I put, I'm a woman, so very standard. So I'm very cisgendered in this way with all the queer theory I do. I still haven't gotten out of that box, you see. And 2, I put, I'm Hungarian, which is very much like his Peruvian, but for me, it came after my gender identity. And again, if I were living in Hungary, that wouldn't make any sense to put that. So that's like saying I'm an immigrant or a refugee or something like that. It's not whether you're Peruvian or Hungarian, although it becomes that in othering. And then 3rd, I put, I'm sorry, no. Woman, professor, Hungarian. The professor is much more important than Hungarian. So, because for me, that professional identity all my life was very important. I was different from that woman I just read you about. I won't go into more details. But let's say for me that getting the tenure was more important. So, okay. So why did we do that? To look at the stories we tell about ourselves. And all of those stories that you think you just told something about yourself. But all of it is embedded in your culture. That if you put that first, that means what you're trying to do is number 2 there, changing the cultural story by being an activist, right? So you could say, in our terminology, that you are exactly, what was the title here that I said wasn't so? Using story to change the system, that was the title. So you're a story system changer by that's what an activist is, to try to, by going there with your very banners. A banner is a micro discourse, like Proverbs, right? That is trying to convince other people to change the story. Yes?
I'm just curious as to like, if people's stories would change over time about the 3 things they would say about themselves. Because
They do, yeah, that's what I said. Student obviously has to change.
yeah,
And if he gets thrown out of the United States for overstaying his visa and he has to spend the rest of his life in Peru, he'll have to change his story. And there are has-beens. There are many people might put lesbian first, and then there are some who have become has-beens. That's another new term we didn't use last time. And then has-been, you don't know that term?
No.
It's not a wonderful term. It's a stupid idea, but it's a wonderful term.
Okay, now we get it.
They were
Like you realize that? Like,
Yes.
Like the straight girls
Word.
who go to college and say, like, oh, I'm gay, and then leave college and
Yeah.
they're
Or the mayor's wife who had a lesbian life and then she married the mayor. So there are a lot of, not so many, but so yes, I'm not saying. However, which ones you change, so some you'd have to eliminate. He'd have to eliminate Peruvian altogether. The student, you probably would stay in the same order, but the student would become, I'm a lawyer. And then the interesting thing would be in your case, since you had a relational one, and we can ask how many people had a relational one, but you had one, so you then become a mother at some point.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting if you put mother first, or if the mother stays there, or which of the 3 places it moves in. I don't have a relational one at all, so that's not a question for me. Okay, how many besides the 2 of us did not have a relational category?
I'm
See, it's-
actually wondering if mine is really, I put kid, because I just feel
That-
like
that- Oh, but you meant that in a different, you
I
didn't
don't
mean somebody's kid.
yeah, but
That-
I'm a 20-year-old kid. is
Yeah.
what I feel.
Yeah, that's more like saying Peruvian, it's a category, yeah.
like, I don't know if adopted counts as one.
No, no, I think it's iffy, depends how you mean it, but I think my judgment would be that the way you mean it is what category I belong to, like
Yeah.
nationalities and so forth.
Yeah.
Okay, enough about that. Let's do one of my favorite articles. And as I said in my letter to you, since it's 1988, you know that to me that it's important. And in the 80s they still do, but it was a big thing to do discourse analysis. So not just looking at words, insult words or little bits, but looking at stories people tell in a gendered way and doing a discourse analysis of these texts. So this is called, and you should definitely look at this afterwards. I had it as required, but I'm going over it now, so it'll be easier for you. You don't have to read every word, but it is very important. So what they did was a research, and at the end here they have the family, 3 generations of 2 Midwestern families, grandmother, daughters, and granddaughters. and one Jewish and one Gentile.